Welcome everyone. My name is Pablo. I'm on the product marketing team here at Semgrep. And yeah, I'm super happy that everyone is joining us for our discussion on remediating vulnerability backlogs with AI. And so with that, I will share my screen and we can briefly cover the agenda and then get into it. Okay, if you have any issues with the screen sharing, please let us know in the chat. Chris is going to be monitoring the chat and he'll be available to answer questions. I will try to keep up with the chat a little bit. There are a lot of people today, so I may not be able to keep up with all the messages, but I'll do the best that I can. And then as questions come in, sometimes we'll pause to answer them, and sometimes we'll go back periodically and kind of review some of the questions that have been asked in the previous moments. So with that, let's go ahead and have a look at today's agenda. So we'll start off with a quick look at what we see in terms of vulnerability management today. I think it's very helpful to look at the context in terms of what organizations are dealing with, where people and teams are really looking for help with AI or just in general. We'll also take a look at the role of guardrails, and that's important because it helps set the context of how we look at AI and where we think AI can provide a lot of value in terms of vulnerability management. And then we'll end it off with some links, some suggestions where you might be able to learn more or play around with some of the things that we show you. And also, if we have time, we can leave a few minutes at the end for Q&A. So I see people joining from all over the world. That's great to see. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, maybe good night, depending on where you are. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Semgrep before we get started, in case some of you are less familiar with Semgrep. Semgrep is the AppSec platform for secure guardrails. That includes a complete platform for SAST, or static analysis, software composition analysis, or SCA, and secrets detection. It's completely transparent, customizable, and extensible. And also, you may have heard of Semgrep's open source project, which powers over 10 million scans per month. As well, there are many innovative organizations that depend on Semgrep to secure their code, like the logos you see there below. And then we are backed by some top-tier investors, such as Felices, Lightspeed, Redpoint, and Sequoia. But enough about Semgrep. Let's dive into why we're here in terms of vulnerability management with AI and how that ties into what we're trying to do in general. So our mission is to profoundly improve software security and reliability. And the reason I mention that is because it's very important to all of us at Semgrep. And I think you'll see that how we evolve the product and how we apply tools like AI into workflows for security teams or software developers, or how we look at helping organizations tackle their challenges like the vulnerability backlog. We really align that work with this mission, which is to profoundly improve security and reliability. So I just wanted to share a little bit of the context, because as we go through and talk about how we look at different aspects of technology, be it AI or be it the Semgrep platform, then I think it's useful to keep this in mind. AI is a very exciting topic for sure, and has gained a lot of attention. I think there's a lot of people who see the promise of AI. There's some skepticism as well, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Our view is really around really how can we use technology like AI to align with this mission. So in terms of vulnerability management today, just wanted to briefly set some context about what challenges we see in vulnerability management and what we hear from when we talk to organizations that are really, I think, looking to us and looking to technologies to help them deal with some of these challenges. So one challenge that we see very, very frequently is the sheer volume of issues that people are having to deal with. And I think this is probably no surprise to anyone on the call. The surface area that needs to be secured continues to increase. The tooling that's available also continues to expand. It gets more sophisticated, addresses more things. And as those things kind of like run and organizations move forward, then the sheer volume of issues really presents a challenge, especially to teams that don't have, let's say, excessive capacity in terms of people power or kind of like other things that they can apply to address the volume of issues. There's also a challenge in the time, and I'll say the flexibility to remediate. So organizations have to be able to respond swiftly to emergencies, and by those I'm referring to kind of like not exactly maybe 0 day, but 0 day like things where incidents kind of drop, and teams need to really move everything aside in order to be able to respond to those security emergencies. So one of the most recent ones that came up a couple months ago, I think now, was the polyfill incident, where polyfill was being used by hundreds of thousands of websites. A popular CDN used to provide browser polyfill was taken over and basically used to send people to gambling sites and kind of malware sites. And when that happened, people had to respond very, very quickly. So it's kind of a drop everything situation, remediate. And of course, to do that, one has to be ready to respond. People have a response plan and so on. And kind of like workflows that they need to have at the ready when this happen. Also for non-emergencies, and this typically, of course, applies to the general backlog of vulnerabilities, people need to remediate those in some reasonable time frames. And oftentimes what people look to do that is a risk-based kind of management and remediation approach. And that is in part because of that sheer volume of potential issues, but there's also other things that people we see weigh. The probability of impact as well as the severity impact are, of course, very important in terms of how likely is something to actually be an issue that impacts end users, privacy, security, availability, performance, whatever it might be. And then also resource availability in a few ways. One is kind of for actively maintained projects. Who are the people working on them? What skills are needed to kind of like manage the risk of those actively maintained projects? And then oftentimes projects that are not actively maintained, like legacy projects, those might have a different resource availability or resource constraint because maybe there's no longer the expertise in the organization to really get into the depths of how a particular kind of code base is working and what are the implications of a change related to that code base, be it related to security or not. And that's something that often people have to consider. What is the risk of kind of leaving a potential issue or potential vulnerability open, let's say, or unresolved, versus what is the risk of potentially unknown impact to a change that might need to happen in order to resolve that issue. So what we see many organizations do is that basically come up with an approach that really is around not trying to fix everything and instead focus on actually exploitable vulnerabilities. And we've done a lot of thinking and work on this, and there's really, this is a topic of another webinar, but this is one of the things that we try to keep in mind very much. And it really aligns back to that mission that I shared earlier about profoundly improving software security, really keeping in mind, at least at the top of mind, what is actually exploitable and what maybe could be at least deprioritized or deferred. Now, in terms of applying kind of tools and techniques and maybe even methodologies or philosophies to this, really around the earlier point I mentioned around kind of like having a reasonable time frame, I thought it was interesting that a few years ago, Gartner published a fairly short paper on setting remediation timeframes, and their general guidance was really to not just kind of have a let's say dogmatic guidance, kind of one-size-fits-all guidance for all vulnerabilities must be kind of remediated or resolved within this time, and instead take a few kind of practical steps in order to have a, let's say, more informed approach. So some of these things I think are not going to be very surprising: aligning the vulnerability management to risk appetite. We just talked about this a little bit. Prioritizing those vulnerabilities, and then also looking at what compensating controls might be available as let's say workarounds or alternatives to direct remediation. And then finally, using technology to automate vulnerability analysis. So that's kind of really where we're getting to or towards today. This paper that I'm referencing here was published in 2021, so a bit before the kind of latest vanguard of AI and all the exciting development that we've seen recently in terms of applying AI to security, but already people were thinking about how can we use technology to automate vulnerability analysis. So on that note, I would love to ask all of you through a quick poll, how are you automating, if at all, any part of your vulnerability management today? So Chris is going to launch a poll, and we'll give folks a few moments to enter your response. And the poll is live in the poll section. So go on the bottom of your screen, and you should see a little card or button for looking at the poll. Okay, I'll give everyone a few more moments to reply. We have 20 folks who have already replied. Okay, and then just another moment or so. We have almost half the folks who have entered their vote. Okay, we're pretty much there. So thanks everyone for entering your response. So let's have a look at what you all said. So do you automate any part of your vulnerability management today? 53% of you said yes, we have some automation built in. 19%, so there's a tie in two answers with 19%. We rely heavily on automation for our vulnerability management, and we somewhat we've tried adding automation, but it's not rolled out in a meaningful way. And then 9% of you answered no, we haven't added automation to our vulnerability management. I'm curious, for those folks who have rolled it out either heavily or kind of to some level of significance, I'm wondering if you could share in the chat maybe like what is one of the areas where you're excited about the kind of impact of using automation in your vulnerability management. Just at a high level, I'm curious if anyone is willing to share what that looks like. If so, please enter into the chat. I'm just curious kind of like where people are seeing success, basically, in terms of adding automation into this area. I see some people typing, so I'll just let that go for just a moment. Okay, so someone is saying automatic updating for SCA, software composition analysis using Renovate bot, and removing false positives and automating notifications via email. So yeah, that's great areas that we've also seen folks using technology for automation. We'll talk a little bit about some of the false positive aspects a little bit later, especially when we get to using AI to that. So thanks for sharing those examples. Okay, so before we talk about like how specifically we're using and looking at AI to tackle vulnerability management, I think it's helpful to set the context and look at how guardrails can help in this area. And the reason is because we're looking at AI as a way to improve or help with vulnerability management in a few areas. And I think it's helpful to look at the overall context so that we understand what those areas are and how they relate to the software development kind of workflow and lifecycle, as well as the challenges that we see teams are facing today. So one of the challenges that we see very, very often is what we call the teams being caught in an AppSec doom loop. So it really starts at the top in the middle here with developers writing software, checking in code, and that code having vulnerabilities. So very common part of the process. And then depending a little bit on the resourcing of a team, but then having security engineers prioritize vulnerabilities, possibly remove false positives, doing some type of kind of like triaging or analysis oftentimes before those issues are presented to developers. Again, this depends a little bit on the organization and their philosophy. And I think that like one of the responses we got in the chat about removing false positives or identifying them early on, I think is exactly related to this. And then, of course, kind of like presenting those issues or findings to developers so that they can fix issues. And ultimately, then we see many organizations kind of like trying to balance all of this. We're now at the kind of 9 o'clock part of the clock. Balancing this with the release schedules, which are often very important and prioritized over fixing security issues, or at least fixing all security issues. And in fact, one security engineer that we talked to at a large financial institution said, well, I realized at the current rate, we will pay down the vulnerability backlog in 100 years. So given the pace of AI software development and technology progress today, I don't know what things will look like in 100 years, but definitely, I think things will have changed quite a bit. And what we're seeing in terms of the challenge and why people feel stuck in this AppSec doom loop is because there's a dilemma. So the success criteria is often tied to risk reduction. That's certainly more of the kind of security organization's concern. And then also speed of software delivery, I mean. And that's perhaps not primarily on the security team, but the security team definitely is looking to enable speed of software delivery. And in some cases, we do see security teams that prioritize this kind of like at the top, and it's what they're worrying about most. And the challenges, we talked a little bit about volume of issues, time in terms of like time of software delivery, and also time to remediate the issues so that things aren't unduly delayed before they are released. And then also relying on developers to fix vulnerabilities. That's kind of a fact of how software development works, but developers aren't often or often are not experts in security issues. So that can be a challenge in terms of what type of enablement, tooling, guidance can be given to developers so that they can be more effective in this remediation. And of course, that's where AI can come in as well, as we'll see in a moment. I'll look at a couple of the chats here. Automating vulnerability management in the sense that we remove false positives and giving the deleted items back to the org for checking. Thank you for that clarification. Or thank you for that additional comment. And then 100 years seems pretty optimistic for a large financial institution. Yes, I don't know the age of or some of our current financial institutions, the large ones, but I think for any company, 100 years would be optimistic. But yeah, we've seen a few of them, I think, that have been around for a little bit longer. So going back to this kind of doom loop, it's helpful to think of, well, how do these issues that we're talking about really kind of enter into the backlog? So you might consider something like an event horizon. Admittedly, this is a little bit traumatic in terms of, once you go past the event horizon, you're never coming out, so to speak. We don't see it that way, but there is a kind of a point where we can think of how can we tackle what's already in the backlog and how can we address things before they even get into the backlog. So those are things on the left, such as like during the development of code itself, perhaps it's in the developer's workflow, maybe it's in the editor, maybe it's through other things like security education, training, and so on. And also by using things like secure guardrails and secure defaults so that issues are prevented from even appearing in the first place. They're prevented by construction. And then in terms of after the issues are present in the backlog, be it kind of like appearing from post-merge testing or maybe periodic scanning, audits, and then we have a number of other categories. I'm not trying to be exhaustive here, but you can think of things like bug bounty programs, for example, as things that may present or may cause issues to be presented into the backlog after code is already kind of like in a more mature state. And we think that AI can help on both of these sides. And kind of really from, we started thinking about this a few years ago, even before our active work on AI, when we started looking at secure guardrails. And we actually were wondering like how much of the common issues that people see over and over again can be even prevented by using techniques like secure guardrails. We actually sent our security research team to look at this, and we found that by using secure guardrails in a certain data set that was studied on XSS specifically, 59% of the instances of XSS could have been prevented by the use or through the use of secure guardrails. That particular data set studied over 3,000 commits related to cross-site scripting, covering 9 kind of programming languages or combinations of programming languages and frameworks. And the idea here is that really it's very, very effective and kind of lower barrier to entry to prevent issues from appearing in the first place, rather than trying to tackle all of the issues once they are already in the backlog and trying to manage that. That's already a thing that has to happen. I'm not suggesting that this would eliminate all of that, but the earlier that they can be, let's say, mitigated or prevented, most likely is going to be the better for the overall health of the vulnerability backlog. We've also seen some organizations write about this. For example, Google in the book Building Secure and Reliable Systems. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what they talk about here. It's a fairly large book. They cover a lot of things. But in terms of the point I made earlier about relying on developers to fix security issues, their contention is that it's unreasonable to expect any developer to be an expert in all these subjects when they have to maintain vigilance about writing or reviewing code. And they're talking about security and reliability primarily in that book. And also they are recommending an approach that with some tools and techniques such as secure guardrails and secure defaults that really make it so that writing code with common classes of security vulnerabilities is impossible. Now, Google's approach may not be for everyone, but there's also other organizations that are taking kind of a guardrails or guardrails-like approach. For example, DocuSign a few years ago gave a talk called Banning Foot Guns, and the talk was about how they use secure by default libraries and enforce their use, and were able to target things like regex denial of service, XXC, open redirects, and SSRF, and really eliminate those eventually from the backlog, really from all of their software development. Now, again, I'm not trying to suggest that this technique is going to eliminate 100% of vulnerabilities, or even for one type of vulnerability class, but getting to something like 59% of reduction in vulnerabilities is going to be a huge lift in terms of how people are then able to manage the remainder, and really also where they apply their resources, people, time, attention, other tools and technologies, and so on, into those that do remain. Okay, I will see if there are any other questions before we get into how we're looking at addressing vulnerability management and get into some more specifics about AI. So if you have any other questions, please enter them into the chat. I'll just scroll backwards here. There was a comment also that your implementation of AI has been impressive and actually useful. Thank you for that comment. So for those of you who are less familiar with the AI implementation, hopefully you'll get a better sense for what that is in just a moment. Okay, so before we get maybe too deep into AI, I think it's worth just talking a little bit about how we're looking at AI related to that comment that I just shared. Some people may look at AI with a certain level of skepticism or maybe enthusiasm, and wonder how much of this is magic, or are people expecting it to be magic? Maybe even people outside security organizations, right? And so, again, going back to what I shared at the beginning of the presentation around our mission, we're not really looking for magic things necessarily, or maybe not in the kind of the way that this GIF is showing. We're really looking at AI as a tool that can help enable teams tackle these issues to improve the security and reliability of software, and ultimately to be actually useful, like Kevin kindly shared earlier. So that's just kind of like I just wanted to share a little bit about how we're looking at it. We're really trying to find the most value that we can get to help teams by using this technology. I'm curious, kind of along those lines, what is your level of skepticism with respect to applying AI in security? Let's keep it scoped to security, not to general applications or kind of like the future of AI in society. So Chris just launched the second poll, and there's a range of options from completely skeptical to not skeptical at all. The future is here. So I'll give folks a few moments to enter the response there. Looks like we have 15 people who responded. And I'll just leave it open for a couple more moments. Okay, thanks everyone for participating in the second and last poll. So 53% of you recorded slightly skeptical, confident that AI will have a positive impact, even if it's not exactly clear what will happen. 31% moderately skeptical. I think AI might have an impact, but it's too soon to tell what that will be. And I have yet to see convincing evidence of its impact. Not skeptical, the future is here, 16%. Exciting times are here. Oh, and somebody maybe just responded now because that went down to 15%. And then absolutely skeptical, 0%. Doubt that AI will have an impact remotely close to what many people imagine. So yeah, I think that is probably reflective of a lot of the reactions and the kind of maybe tone that we hear from people when we're talking about AI. I think maybe as we are in the security world and maybe tend to have a naturally skeptical look on things, we're really looking to see evidence of the positive impact. But I think even 15% of the future is here, not skeptical. I think that's pretty exciting to see in terms of wow, people are enthusiastic. There is healthy skepticism, I would say, but there is promise that people are already seeing and hopefully realizing. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue with, how we are looking at AI in Semgrep. And so AI is exposed in Semgrep and kind of built into Semgrep through Semgrep Assistant. And it primarily works in these 4 areas: triaging, fixing, contextualization, and rule writing. We're not going to have a chance to go into number 4, and it's a little bit kind of outside the realm of today's webinar topic. So we'll focus on the triage, fix, and contextualization parts, and share with you like how we're using AI to address each of these different areas. First of all, a simplified diagram of how Semgrep Assistant works. You can actually see at the bottom in the red outlined box how Semgrep is working without Semgrep Assistant enabled. And as you can see, it's something that does not have to be part of the Semgrep workflow if you choose for it not to be. And it is a thing that people enable and opt into if they so choose. Now, again, this is pretty simplified. There is a more detailed diagram in a blog post in case people are curious to read more about exactly what's going on. But this is one thing that is helpful to see, like, what is the difference between using AI and not using AI in the Semgrep context, and then what are the things that are actually involved in that workflow. And you'll see there additional metadata on the left of the top box refers to rule messages. So these are messages that are part of metadata in Semgrep rules, and then other metadata, previous decisions made by Semgrep Assistant, and that feeds into, along with the kind of output of the Semgrep engine itself, that feeds into Semgrep Assistant and works in terms of triaging, fixing, component tagging, or contextualization, and then kind of get exposed to different people, different teams in various ways. Maybe in the developer workflow, maybe in an integration like a Slack notification, in the Semgrep dashboard itself. It could be in Jira tickets, etc. So that it goes kind of also a little bit beyond the kind of AI aspect itself and more back into the Semgrep AppSec platform and the different ways that it can engage with stakeholders, basically. So let's take a look at Autotriage first. So there's two ways that this can work or does work. I'd like to really focus on the experience for the developer first. And here is what we show here is a screenshot from a pull request, a GitHub pull request, and subsequent comment on the pull request. And here, Semgrep Assistant is actually taking a result that came from a code scan and Semgrep's output of that code scan. And then Semgrep Assistant is labeling this result or finding, I should say, as a false positive, or it can label it, of course, as a true positive. As well, Semgrep is learning from historical human triage decisions. You can see right below the green box, the developer is able to engage with the Semgrep result by typing in a kind of slash command. So slash Semgrep ignore and then a reason. They can choose to ignore a particular finding by doing that. And that is then recorded into the Semgrep AppSec platform. And then security teams can also see that as well. And overall, after having Semgrep out in the market and being used by organizations for over a year, we found over a 90% user agreement rate. And by that, we mean people looking at this recommendation, let's say, and agreeing with its recommendation about being a true positive or false positive result, kind of basically for the finding. So that is one way where triage is kind of being augmented or, let's say, improved by AI. And this is the example of the developer workflow where developers can actually see the particular guidance given by Semgrep Assistant in terms of doing that triage before, and then this is going to be before those issues are even entered into the backlog. Another way that Semgrep Assistant can help is through the actual auto fixing or fixing of issues. And this is a way in which Semgrep Assistant actually looks at the code that is being kind of changed in the context of a pull request or merge request, and then also looks at the particular finding that has been produced by the Semgrep engine and the Semgrep rules that are running in that engine, and then is creating or generating a recommended fix for the source code that is being reviewed in a way that would remediate the issue that has been identified. And this is tailored remediation guidance. So it is not a generic remediation guidance such as, oh, there is a SQL injection and this is how SQL injections work. And here's a generic example of a SQL injection being remediated. Instead, it is a very contextualized or specific to the code base fix guidance for that particular code that's in question. And so you see there, there is a description of what this is in the paragraph below the suggested change. And of course, that's important for the developer's context, for them to understand what is going on. And there's also a specific kind of a suggested change kind of diff where developers can actually choose to commit the suggestion directly. There's maybe some pros and cons to that we can talk about in a moment, or they can use that as this suggestion as a starting point to actually look at how might they change their code to avoid this issue in the first place. It looks like there's some comments coming here, so let me pause for a moment and take a drink of water as well, and then look at those. Okay, so there's a question about if there are any metrics to help an AppSec team quantify how often Semgrep interacts in terms of events. And maybe, James, if you could clarify, do you mean how often Semgrep Assistant interacts with developers, like in this view here, and how often its guidance is accepted in terms of like commit suggestions? maybe I'll start to kind of add some context to that. Yeah, we do have some metrics. I'll share some aggregate metrics a little bit later on, and also in terms of generally with the kind of like the growth of the backlog and how vulnerabilities are being or findings are being shown to developers. We have I'll show a little bit later some views of that. I don't know if we break those out today by of the things that were shown to developers, how many of them had a suggested kind of assistant generated suggestion. But we can take a closer look at that a little bit later on. Okay, and then another thing that's related to fixing is something that's newer that we just released just a little over a month ago called memories. And this is something that is also related to fixing or auto-fixing. And this is where actually security teams can enter plain English instructions to Semgrep Assistant and have those be part of the instructions or part of the prompt that is used by Semgrep Assistant in order to generate its remediation. And this could be, for example, what's highlighted there, like internal notes as a standard. We use this function to sanitize input. I'll show a number of other examples here in a moment. And this way, organizations can not only get a fix that will work. For example, in the previous slide, here's the fix for this potential SQL injection issue, and the suggested fix is going to avoid that or mitigate that issue. But it can also go beyond that and have the preferred or maybe organization standardized way to do a particular thing. And this is one example here. You can see in the bottom part of that screenshot, the Semgrep Assistant suggested change is actually using that jsoup.clean function to in its suggested change, and so that way the remediation guidance that's given to developers is of following a particular way that that's typically a security team is looking to use in their guidance. Not just anything that works, but a particular way that works. And so what I can do here is actually show you some examples by pulling up Semgrep and just showing you here. We have I think a screenshot of this later, but it's a good time to look at it now. And this is just in the settings page of the Semgrep dashboard. And here you see this customize with memories, teach Assistant your preferred practices and secure defaults to improve generated guidance. And we can review and edit the memories here. For example, let's just take a look at these. One of these is around log injection. To prevent against log injection issues, we recommend using the following security library. And then you need to also import this particular package or library. And then we can also give, for example, remediation instructions in a particular language, in this example in Spanish, and please give the remediation instruction in Spanish. You can also have the source code be kept in English, so the code itself is still in English. And also, for example, put a link to our AppSec wiki after the rule feedback and things like that. Use SafeNix as a sanitizer, etc. So these are all things that organizations can use to customize the remediation guidance that's given by Semgrep. Often this will match or be closely tied to the kind of security education and training that is given to developers. And that way, the developers are seeing a consistent kind of remediation guidance in their kind of code review workflow that matches what the security team is kind of like being a proponent of, in terms of here's how we improve security in our project, in our organization. These are things you should be familiar with. These are the things that we recommend in terms of ways to do things in order to improve security. And of course, security teams don't have to do that kind of like manually in every kind of like code review or go back through code reviews or anything like that. It's automated through Semgrep Assistant. Okay, the next slide was just that screenshot of what I just showed there. And also these can be kind of tied to particular projects for particular Semgrep scanning rules. So you still have this kind of deterministic link between what is being produced as guidance and where it is being shown, or to whom it's being shown. And what we mean by that is, for a particular code repository, and then for a particular rule, you'll see here on the right side of that screenshot, each of these memories has a link to the particular Semgrep rule that triggered or can trigger a finding. And then that way it is very customized to the particular guidance that you want to see. It's not just kind of everywhere we're going to always suggest this thing. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of where you want to deploy this AI generated guidance. Okay, and then finally, the last aspect of AI and how we're integrating AI into Semgrep today that we're going to get to is around contextualization. So this goes back to what we talked about earlier around prioritization and really understanding how we can address the vulnerability backlog with a risk-oriented approach. So the idea with AI contextualization is to prioritize security findings where the code itself is high risk. And so we use something called component tagging. You'll see in the bottom part of that screenshot, what's outlined in green there are tags. And those tags are automatically generated by Semgrep Assistant and then are used to categorize the areas of the source code that are related to particular findings, like this one here, no CSRF token, and categorizing them in terms of risk and also the kind of type of role that the code is involved with, right? So, for example, this code is dealing with processing payments. This code touches user data or PII, personally identifiable information. It's related to user authentication, or conversely, on the other end, it may be related. Maybe that the code is related to tests. Tests are often excluded, kind of like in a systematic way, perhaps, but oftentimes there will be maybe developer scripts, migrations, maybe documentation related code, or code as docs as code. And those things also can be classified as low risk, and then you may not want to worry about them with the same level of, say, intensity that you worry about the high risk components. And then the remediation guidance also can be delivered directly to developer workflows. We mentioned or showed the screenshot of the GitHub pull request, but some teams are also interacting, some security teams are also interacting with their developers through ticketing systems like Jira, and they may or may not, or they may have different processes in terms of when tickets are created, maybe before the security team triages them, or maybe after the security team triages them. But regardless, this type of contextualization or remediation guidance can also be exposed to developers, even if there's the kind of a primary interaction point through something like Jira. Okay, so these are different ways that Semgrep can use AI in order to help with things like contextualization, fixing, triaging. When all of this is up and running, then it's also helpful to take a step back and look at what is the impact of all this, and how can we overall track the progress of the team in terms of getting on top of the backlog. And so with the Semgrep dashboard, this is also something that we released just about a month ago. We've recently released some enhanced reporting that gives teams visibility into the growth or the shrinking maybe of the vulnerability backlog. And so you'll see here, for example, a week by week or day by day kind of analysis of the number of findings that are introduced, so new findings, how many are fixed. As we saw in the previous example, some may be ignored, and then as a result, there's a net change in the overall vulnerability backlog. As well, if you look at the screenshot on the right, you can look at this also with only a view of the kind of dynamic aspects or the growth in this backlog, only as it's related to very important things. And by that, we mean critical and high severity findings and high confidence findings for Semgrep code, and this is the SAST component of Semgrep, so first party code analysis. Also reachable dependency vulnerabilities through Semgrep supply chain, and secrets or credentials that are known to be valid and kind of actively providing access to sensitive or protected resources. So that way you can look at the change in the backlog, not only in the overall kind of including all of low, medium, high priority issues or severity issues, but if you really want to look at again, with that risk-based lens, look at the things that are most important to your team, you can just toggle that recommended priority and then look at how many of those issues are being introduced, fixed, ignored, etc. So back to James's question, like this view today doesn't have kind of a further breakdown of which ones of these are being shown to developers with Semgrep Assistant remediation guidance, but there is another view that can give us a little bit more detail. I think I have it here on the next slide. Yeah. Here we're seeing the left side of the graph that I showed maybe near the beginning of the presentation, where we were looking at what are vulnerabilities that have yet to enter the backlog, they haven't crossed the event horizon, and how many of those are being fixed before they enter the backlog. In other words, how many are prevented from entering the backlog. On the left, we can see the percentage of new findings that are shown to developers. And so you'll see of all the findings that are kind of generated by code scanning through the whole Semgrep Appsec platform, how many of these findings are shown to developers. Not all of them need to be shown necessarily, right? You may have and in fact, many of our customers do have an approach where they're not going to show all the findings to developers. Certainly, or often is the case that not the low or maybe medium severity or criticality issues are being shown to developers. And then on the right side, the breakdown of the findings that are shown to developers, in this case in pull requests, how many of those are being fixed, ignored, or are remaining open. So similar in concept to the graph that I showed just previously in terms of the overall backlog, but in this case, kind of specifically relating to the issues that are being shown to developers. Okay, and then Kevin is asking, how do I turn on the guardrails feature? I don't see it in my account. So if you reach out to your Semgrep representative, this is in beta, so we are happy to turn it on for you if you are interested in finding out more. And the other graph of fixed versus new as well. Yeah, these are I'm just showing them in a couple different slides, so it's a little bit easier to see, but they're on the same enhanced reporting graph, or page, I should say. Okay, then finally, just wanted to share a few stats from the impact or about the impact of Semgrep Assistant overall. So we launched Semgrep Assistant in the spring of 2023, so it's been a little bit over a year, and we see hundreds of organizations using Assistant, over 50,000 findings evaluated, over 1,000 AI autofixes being produced in a week. And below there, I'll let you read the comments, but there have been some very positive comments from some of our customers who have been running Semgrep Assistant for a while and seeing how the help in terms of contextualization, remediation guidance, interaction with developers has been very, very valuable for ultimately helping with the vulnerability backlog itself, and also to help developers and organizations fix vulnerabilities more quickly. Okay, so finally, I wanted to touch on some resources that you might be interested in. This is AI and security and AI with vulnerability backlogs. This is a big topic, so there's definitely lots to explore. We could have gone on maybe for another hour to dive into other aspects. One is, if you want to try Semgrep, I definitely encourage you to log in. You can get started for free. Go.semgrep.dev/login and start playing around with code scanning and looking at how you can really like leverage some of the things that we've talked about today in your team. Also, a plug for my colleague Clint Gibler. So Clint is the author of TLDRsec. It's a very popular security newsletter published weekly. So in his last issue last week, he actually summarized every AI talk from B-Sides LV, Las Vegas, Black Hat, and DEF CON. And those are the security events that happened at the beginning of August in Las Vegas. Some that are, I think, maybe of particular interest that were mentioned there. One from Microsoft, Predict, Prioritize, Patch, how Microsoft harnesses LLMs for security response. And also another topic, and I forget the author immediately, but painful learnings of applying AI in security. And he summarized 58 more talks in there. And there's actually two levels of summary. There's a 1-sentence summary and separately a few sentence summary for each of those. Some of these have recordings as well, so you may be able to kind of watch the presentation or talk if you weren't able to attend in Las Vegas live. Some of them don't have him or don't have him yet, but regardless, Clint has a little bit of a summary in that. TLDRsec.com, no semicolon, just TLDRsec.com is how you get to that. We also have a new course in the Semgrep Academy related to secure guardrails. There's also other courses around secure coding and other security related topics there as well. And just generally, I definitely encourage and invite everyone here today to join the Semgrep community on our Slack. go.semgrep.dev/Slack. It's a friendly, welcoming community. Feel free to jump in, ask questions, meet some of your peers in the security industry, and let us know if there's anything that you're curious about or you could get help with. Thank you, Jason, for linking to tldrsec.com. Clint is a fabulous resource. Clint is publishing this weekly. He has been for, I think, over 4 years. I don't remember exactly. He's also a part of the Semgrep team, but this is not really related to Semgrep. It's just a free resource available to anyone who wants to subscribe. And with that, we've reached the end of the prepared content.